the Deodar House. When I was about 8 years old, our family packed up once again and moved from a little house in Garden Grove, California, to a much larger home on Deodar Street in nearby Santa Ana. Now, before you picture some fancy two-story mansion, remember this was the Stuart family. A bigger house simply meant there was a slightly better chance you wouldn't trip over one of your brothers on the way to the bathroom. Now with only 6 kids at home, my parents never really found a house that was big enough. Every move was simply another attempt to squeeze 11 people into a place that felt just a little less crowded. To us kids, moving wasn't all bad. A new neighborhood meant new friends, new adventures, and new places to explore. Looking back, I had no idea that this house on Deodar Street would become the center of our family for more than 50 years. It would become the Stuart home. I was getting ready to start 4th grade at Loma Vista Elementary School. The neighborhood was brand new. Many of the homes hadn't even been sold yet, but the builders had already planted beautiful green lawns in front of every house. They wanted the neighborhood to look inviting. There was just one problem. Empty houses don't water themselves. My older brother Kent and I somehow landed the job of keeping those brand new lawns alive until families moved in. Looking back, I can't believe a realtor trusted 2 little boys with thousands of dollars worth of landscaping. Apparently, he either had tremendous confidence in us, or he was desperate. Kent and I dragged hoses from yard to yard every day. We watered grass, bushes, trees, sidewalks, each other, pretty much anything that got in the way of the hose. Somehow the lawn survived. Best of all, we got paid. That may not sound like much today, but to an 8-year-old boy who had never really had spending money, it felt like I'd just signed a professional sports contract. My parents didn't give allowances. Not because they didn't want to. There simply wasn't enough money. If we wanted spending money, we worked. Before we moved, my mother had taught me how to iron. Some of our neighbors would actually pay me 5 cents for every shirt or pair of pants I ironed. 5 cents. I thought I was becoming a wealthy businessman. The lawn watering job felt like a promotion. For the first time in my life, I had enough money to buy a few things without asking my parents. That little lesson stayed with me. I learned early that work wasn't something to avoid. Work gave you choices. As the years passed, the Deodar house became much more than the place where we slept. It became the Stuart family headquarters. My parents bought the house for around $27,000. More than 50 years later, after both of them had passed away, our family sold it for over $500,000. Real estate experts would probably call that a great investment. I simply call it home. Walking through the front door was like entering the Stuart Hall of Fame. Family pictures covered the walls. Above the fireplace hung the senior portraits of almost every one of us kids. Whenever someone visited for the first time, they'd usually stop and stare. "Are those all your brothers and sisters?" I'd grin. Every one of them. The house was almost always full, not just with family, with friends, neighbors, missionaries, relatives, salesmen, complete strangers who somehow became friends before they left. Mom never seemed happier than when the house was full of people. She had a remarkable gift for making everyone feel like they belonged there. If you came to visit around dinner time, there was a pretty good chance you'd stay for dinner. If you stayed for dinner, there was a pretty good chance Mom would insist you have seconds. If you still looked hungry, she'd probably send you home with leftovers. Feeding people wasn't something she did. It was who she was. The Deodar house was filled with something else besides food. Music. Mom absolutely loved music. If someone wanted to sing, she was more than happy to sit down at the piano and accompany them. It didn't matter if they sounded like Frank Sinatra or a sick goat. Everyone got accompaniment. Years later, when karaoke machines became popular, Mom bought one. That little machine got quite a workout. Many nights, my brothers, sisters, and I stayed up well past midnight, singing every song we knew. Dad usually joined right in. He had a beautiful tenor voice, and Mom loved singing harmony with him. Watching those two sing together is one of my favorite memories. Friends who came over didn't stand much of a chance. Sooner or later, someone handed them a microphone. Whether they could sing or not didn't really matter. Around our house, enthusiasm counted for a lot more than talent. Some of the best singers I've ever heard came through our living room. Some of the worst did too. Everybody got applause. Looking back, those evenings weren't really about music. They were about family. They were about laughing until your stomach hurt. They were about creating memories that none of us knew we'd treasure so much someday. Years later, during my Vitamix career, the Deodar House almost became a hotel. Demonstrators from all over the country stayed there while working shows throughout Southern California. Mom and Dad never charged anyone a dime. Why would they? There was always room for one more. Mom simply cooked a little more food, made another bed, set another place at the table. Nobody ever left hungry. Nobody ever left feeling like a stranger. That's just who my parents were. There was one place in the house, though, that always made me stop and think. Above the fireplace, surrounded by all of our senior pictures, hung the photograph of one little boy. He wasn't wearing a graduation gown. He wasn't dressed in a tuxedo. He was simply smiling at us from another time. His name was Richard. He was my oldest brother. He died in a bicycle accident when he was only 7 years old, years before I was born. I never met Richard, yet somehow I felt like I'd known him my entire life. His picture wasn't there to remind us of sadness. It was there to remind us that our family wasn't complete without him. As a little boy, I didn't fully understand why that photograph occupied such an important place in our home. As an adult, I understand completely. The Deodar house wasn't special because it was bigger than our other homes. It was special because life happened there. We worked there. We laughed there. We sang there. We cried there. We forgave there. We welcomed people there. And somehow, inside those walls, 2 remarkable parents managed to raise 9 children who always knew they were loved. If those old walls could talk, they'd probably tell stories for days. Fortunately, that's exactly what I'm about to do.